Good morning and welcome to our adult story time this morning. It's the month of October and we're taking our stories this month from Franklin County Ghosts. I hope you've enjoyed the past 2 weeks. We're going to go in today and we're going to read the story about the Antietam Humane Society. Sometimes the dogs would bark at night. Ellen had worried about this at first. She lived across the street from the animal shelter, wondering if the dogs would bark at night and keep her up. The small dogs would start first, faint, high-pitched yipping sounds. They would be joined moments later by the medium-sized dogs' louder, slightly fuller barks. Finally, the large dogs would join in, their low, rumbling bellows fleshing out the choir. She did not hear the dogs in the beginning. The barking did not start until later. Florence Lyon was a well-known and well-respected, affluent, and slightly eccentric lifetime resident of Waynesboro. Her family fortune had come from dairy cows and thoroughbreds, and she lived in a sprawling farm that had occupied hundreds of acres along the east branch of the Antietam Creek. When Lyon passed away in 1973, her love of animals was reflected in the terms of her will. She had directed that 54 acres and $250,000 be utilized to create the Antietam Humane Society. A barn and trust funds to care for her 22 animals were included in the estate, as was a small house located directly across the road from the shelter. The house was designated for use by the shelter manager, but eventually became a rental property generating income for the shelter. That was how Ellen had come to be there. Her mother, Sarah, was the shelter's assistant director. It made sense to accept Sarah's invitation to live there with her in the rented house. Ellen, her husband John, and their infant son Carson. They would save money, and with her mother right there, or just across the street during the day, childcare would not be an issue. Her husband agreed, and they all settled into the small 2-story house. Carson slept in his crib in Ellen and John's bedroom. The bedroom next to theirs would be Carson's when he was older. Sarah set her bedroom up in the finished attic. All had been well in the house and all had been quiet at night, until the time came for Carson to sleep in his own room. That was when Ellen first began to notice that sometimes the dogs would bark at night, the same nights that Carson would wake up screaming. Carson had never been any trouble at night and was normally a sound, heavy sleeper. When he was almost 12 months old, his parents moved his crib into the bedroom next to theirs. The first night was brutal. Carson woke up sometime between midnight and 2 a.m. wailing. Ellen rushed to his crib and snatched him up. She could feel his body shivering. Solving the issue in the usual fashion, Carson slept in his parents' bed that night. Okay, his mother reasoned, this is normal. He'll get used to his room and he'll settle in eventually. But he didn't. Most nights, always between the hours of midnight and 2 a.m., Carson would wake up, apparently startled by something, and sob. Sometimes he would wake up and scream. When he was old enough, they put him in a toddler bed. Carson would climb down from the bed at night and cry. Sometimes they would find him sleeping on the floor in the family room in the morning. We never had any inkling why this child would not sleep in there, Ellen recounted years later. If we put him in our bed, he would sleep all night. If we put him on the couch, he would sleep all night. If we would put him anywhere, he would sleep, except in that room. As time wore on, Ellen started to wake up every night in anticipation of the nightly disturbance. And it was on one such night when she woke up first that she saw the lady. I was sound asleep. I woke up and she was there. Ellen could see her son's bed from her open bedroom door and glanced in that direction. But on this night her view was obstructed, and Ellen saw instead a woman looking down at her from the side of her bed. She had long, straight hair. It wasn't blonde hair, but it wasn't real dark, and she had on a long, light-colored skirt and long-sleeve light shirt. The skirt was very full and it appeared to her to resemble clothing worn in the mid-1800s. I don't remember anything about her face other than I was scared to death. Ellen jumped out of bed and the lady vanished. She was just gone, she said. Her husband stirred and asked her what had happened. They both decided it had been a dream. A week later, she would find out she was pregnant with their second child. Carson was 7 years old when his brother David was born. Although he still refused to sleep in his room at night, it had become less of an issue since Carson typically found his way to the couch or went up to sleep in his grandmother's room without disturbing anyone. As David approached his first birthday, Carson took part of the attic as his bedroom, and David's crib was moved into Carson's room. David was sleeping through the night and was an excellent baby, Ellen recalled. He slept through the night at a very early age. We never had an ounce of a problem. She and her husband decided they would not allow David to sleep in their bed or be freed from his room at night, as it had been the case with Carson. Both believe now that Carson's inability to sleep in his room stemmed from their leniency in the beginning. But the very first night David spent in what was now his room, he woke up bawling. And it happened the next night and the next. Every night between 12 and 2 a.m., David woke up and cried. What was going on? And then one night she saw her again, the lady. Only this time the apparition was leaning over David's crib. What are you doing? Ellen yelled as she flew from her bed to David's crib, scaring her husband and waking Carson and Sarah upstairs. But the lady had long disappeared, just as she had the first time, and just as she would do again and again in the weeks and months that followed, as Ellen raced toward her in the night to get her away from her son. The lady. Everyone thought I was losing my mind. Ellen's mother believed her, but her husband didn't, and Carson never told them why he would not sleep in that room. She had no idea what to do. But then the day came when she knew what she had to do, and it was something. David was down for his nap in his crib, and Ellen thought she would run across the street to the shelter for just a moment to see her mother. She had never left either of her sons while they napped, but David was sound asleep, and it would only be across the street where she could see the house at all times, and it would only be for a second. She had called ahead of time, and Sarah met her outside at the front door. As Ellen said hello to her mother, something suddenly told her to turn around. She looked back across the street to her house. The lady was standing in the doorway. She screamed, "She's standing in the door, don't you see her?" But Sarah saw nothing. As Ellen flew across the street to the house and through the front door to where she saw the lady standing, the doorway to her son's bedroom, where he lay sound asleep. But no one was there. It was Sarah who finally decided that they had to do something. Sarah had worked at the Humane Society almost since its inception and had worked her way up to assistant director. Over the years, she had earned extra income by taking care of patrons' pets while they vacationed or were away for one reason or another. She had regular clients whose animals she fed every day before she came to work, and others she cared for at night. She walked dogs, fed cats, and even took care of a few goats and horses. There was a woman who lived in Cascade, Maryland, just across the Pennsylvania line, whose dogs she had walked and whose cats she had fed. Her name was Deborah. She loved animals and was a consistent and loyal patron of the Humane Society. She also happened to be a psychic. The reluctant psychic. Deborah had come to an unwanted national attention when more than 10 years before she had read an article in a morning paper about a police department whose dog had disappeared during training in a forested area of Maryland. "I know where your dog is," she told the officer in charge of the canine unit, convinced he would dismiss her as a lunatic and hang up on her. He did not. Deborah found their dog. She went on to work on more than 50 homicides and missing persons cases for various local, state, and federal law enforcement organizations, although the federal agencies would never admit it, until she grew weary of the attitudes and the constant testing of her abilities by skeptical officers and withdrew to a quieter life in the Blue Ridge Summit area of Franklin County. She was known for her work at the Blue Ridge Summit Free Library, loved by the children for the story hour she hosted every Saturday, and known by the residents as the person to seek out when your pet goes missing. But every now and then, Deborah would get a telephone call like the one she had received from Sarah. Sarah was on one extension and Ellen was on the other. They described what had gone on with Carson and what was occurring now with David. But before Ellen mentioned what she had seen, Deborah interrupted. "There's a woman there." Deborah described the lady's appearance all the way down to the type of shoes she wore. "She's just looking over the baby to make sure he's okay," she assured them. "That's where she took care of her own children." She went on to explain that the entity was not malevolent. She was just doing what she had always done. "You need to tell her to go into the light," Deborah instructed. "Tell her that everything is all right, the children are safe, and she doesn't need to check on them, and that she should go into the light." It seemed far-fetched, like something out of a low-grade television movie, but Sarah agreed to do it. So I hung up the phone, sat on the floor of David's bedroom, and began to speak to the lady. As Ellen watched, Sarah spoke out loud to whatever had been bothering the children. Sarah reassured her that the children were safe and that she was free to go now and go into the light. She did this 3 times. Sarah had just finished the 3rd repetition when something grabbed her from inside. A cold, bitter metallic freeze twisted its way through her body in a swirling mass of crystalline breath. She shivered violently. "It was like this rush," Sarah recounted. "I really can't explain it. Cold, bitter, bitter cold. It just went through me. It was just weird. I never felt anything like that before. And then it was gone." The night settled into a peaceful, uninterrupted rhythm. David slept in his room without incident. The lady never reappeared, and Ellen's family went on with the simple business of living. Eventually, they moved on to a larger house. Carson, now a young man, never explained or spoke to anyone about what had startled him awake every night. "It was so long ago, I just couldn't tell you," he claimed to those who would pursue this story. But after much prodding, persuaded by adulthood and distance, Carson stated, "It just felt like something was always looking at me. It was weird. I never saw anything, but I always felt there was something around me. There was someone always there, but they weren't." Epilogue. Another family now lives in the house across from the Antietam Humane Society, a young couple and their 3-year-old son. He was recently moved into his own room. His mother and Ellen are acquainted, and in recent conversations she lamented that her son would not sleep in his room. "He will not sleep in that room," she said. "He won't even play in his room anymore. He takes all his toys out and plays in the family room." Ellen wavered between telling her everything and telling her nothing. "Why won't he sleep there?" she gingerly asked. Her friend looked at her, sighed, and said, "He told me there are monsters there." And that's today's story. It was a rather long one, but we hope you enjoyed it. Join us next week when we'll take another look at a story out of Franklin County Ghost. Until that time, stay healthy, be safe, and have a wonderful week.